Welcome to COVID Unmasked. I am Julia Jordan-Zachery. I want to offer a little bit of a trigger warning. Listener discretion is advised. Some episodes may touch on troubling topics such as self harm, including cutting, loss, and death, might be hints of sadness. So I encourage you all to do what you need to do in order to take care of your spirit as you engage with us in Black women's journeys through COVID 19. When Black women show up, we bring our wisdom, resilience, and more importantly, we bring our truth.
She wasn't personified just into one woman. She seemed all too familiar to me, almost as if she was fam.
Grab your tea. Welcome. I want to welcome our guests to our podcast, COVID Unmasked, Black Women's Stories. Today, we have two wonderful guests who are going to take us through a little bit of their journey of COVID and its overlap with their abilities and their disabilities and how they navigated through life with the realities of their lives. I am not a huge fan of introducing people, of telling folk their names and their stories. So, right about now, I'm going to turn it over to our guests who will introduce themselves.
I am Radscheda Nobles. I am a professor at Winston-Salem State.
Hi, my name is Eris Eady. I am a chaplain and executive coach from Cleveland, Ohio.
Thank you, Eris, for joining us today. So, like I said, this is your story to tell, but I'm going to start us off with a little bit and then we can dive in, we can dip out. You know how us Black women, girls, and femmes tell stories. We pause the story, back up, tell a story from 20 years ago and bring it forward, and it all makes sense, right? So, let's start with this first question. How did the COVID-19 pandemic affect your daily life as a Black woman with a disability?
I'll start. This is Eris. For me, it illuminated the disabilities that I already had that I did not know I was just functioning in the world with, while adding on additional disabilities as well. There was a learning curve that I had to encounter, to just become understanding and accepting of the fact that the way that I would live my life moving forward would be drastically different from the world that I was living beforehand.
Wow, that's kind of loaded. Um, it was very overwhelming to me. It felt like I was living on a different planet. Let me just say it just like that. My anxiety and my PSD heightened. Just going to the grocery store, my everyday grocery store shopping became like exhausting, just not seeing the proper things in the store. It became even more hyping because I have a lot of compound health conditions, like I'll name some so you can kind of understand what compound is. I have epilepsy, I have neurofibromatosis, I have PSD, I have depression. Let me change that. I don't have. I was diagnosed because I don't like to say anything half me, but I like to say diagnosed. Neurofibromatosis, a cluttering impediment, and all those things made it more complicated because I wasn't able to go to places like go to my doctor straight up. They kind of know what I needed. Trying to do my basic healthcare online, it was just complicated. So I felt very isolated. Everyday life felt isolated. I just didn't know really what to do. I felt lost. So my everyday thing became like something new. And I'm used to, with the nature of my disabilities, I'm used to routines. So I didn't have those routines. So life was just chaotic.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. This notion that you felt lost, right? And being able to access what some people consider everyday type things. So, can you share a little bit more about that? Like, how did you begin to learn how to navigate that? What kind of learning curve was that? What did it require of you?
I'm gonna be honest. I had to reach out to people. I had to tell people what the problem I had, like rely on some friends, rely on some strangers to see how I could navigate some things. I'm not really, I'm gonna be honest, I'm really not, I'm normally the strong one. So people come to me for the knowledge. I had to seek help from others. Like I had to say, well, this is what I'm experiencing, or I can't get my medicine. Do you have any suggestions? Or, I don't know really how to get up here. Like, for example, some of the if you want an appointment, you had to write out what was going on with you. And most of my doctor things, I have dyslexia. So it just took me extended time when I normally would call them and they'll just put me in, do it in my behalf. But it just took me a lot of time. So in advance, I would get friends to write out what I need and I just copy and paste. Like I had to rely on my support of people and not be afraid of what anybody was going to think about me. And normally that's why I normally don't like to ask for help with the nature of my compound because I don't want people to see me as the disease already kind of make people think I'm weak. So I try to make sure that I don't like to give them an extra impression of anything. So I try to do things as much as possible by myself, people.
Mhm. So it brought you to a place of vulnerability and having to be open to invite people into your life. Eris, what is that like for you now that you are facing your health concerns?
It's terrifying, to be honest. It's really difficult. It's really unsettling, especially as a new parent.
Mm,
I have a 1-year-old child, and navigating disability while pregnant was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Like advocating for yourself as a black femme, as a black bisexual non-binary person was already hard enough. Adding pregnancy on top of that was even more difficult. Having to prove to people that I was high risk, because nobody saw long COVID as a high risk condition with pregnancy because there just has not been enough work to understand what pregnancy and long COVID really meant. And so, it was honestly terrifying, but I finally was able to advocate for myself to get placed with a high risk obstetrician, which really made the difference for me, just navigating issues around my heart and having to wear heart monitors and be seen really regularly by high risk and then the regular OB and then the doula visits and then the nurses visits and all of that lined on top of one another. I had to just be very, very diligent at all times. And I'm finding myself now having to continue to be incredibly diligent at all times because I want to be able to survive for my child. I want my child to be able to enjoy their parent for as long as possible despite the difficulties of my disability. I want to be able to navigate it well. And so it's been very, very, it's been scary, it's been unsettling, but I just had to become my biggest advocate and remove people from my life who do not have the urgency that I have, and just continue to be in care community with the people who I love.
So I'm hearing these kind of narratives around urgency, around advocacy, self-advocacy, around having to assert yourself in a particular way. And that's all wonderful. And we celebrate that. And we tend to sometimes think about, Black women and femmes are strong and they know how to do this. But let's talk a little bit of the cost. What is some of the cost associated with constantly having to be vigilant that you are going to get the care that you need? What does that feel like to both of you?
It can just become overwhelming sometimes when you gotta keep reminding people what you need. Or, stressful. We probably gonna hit this, but I was fortunate in the sense of I had a good doctor team, and I really think it would have to do with I had insurance at this point, right? Prior experiences, I didn't have insurance, and I just didn't get treated properly, right? And I wasn't considered important. Insurance kind of changed some things around sometimes. So I can say during COVID, I had a very supportive health team where we met by Zoom. Everybody was on the same page. My neurologist, I mean, everybody. But sometimes I have to, just remind them, like, what about this? What about this? But they had me in their best interest, let me say. But it gets stressful to tell other people sometime outside the doctors, like, I couldn't get the COVID shot. It was too many compound issues. So people are just like, well, I wouldn't listen to your doctor, just get the shot. And I'm just like, I can't. It's gonna complicate my situations. And then I was put in that bucket of people that they were saying that didn't want the COVID shot, and we were trying to be rebellious and all this other stuff. But it wasn't quite that. There's a number of people that could not get that shot. Just like my neurofibromatosis, I give you an example. Everybody that got received that shot that had neurofibromatosis, they had a lot more tumors came on
Mm.
major organs. It just started, and they can't exactly link, but they just know once these people started getting these shots, the COVID shot, people with my particular disease started having even more problems. And we just didn't want to create more problems for me. I already have a collapsed lung, I already have one kidney. We wanted to trying to compound stuff. So I'm just like, it's just explaining to people over and over was the cost. Like it was just stressful.
Thank you for sharing that. Eris, you said you have long COVID, and we are now slowly talking about long COVID. And we know, for example, with HIV and AIDS pandemic, how Black women and femmes got written out of that story, right? Weren't perceived as actually contracting the virus, etc. What has been that experience like for you, given the kind of history of how we write Black women and femmes out of pandemics?
For sure. It took me until just a couple of months ago to officially get a diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome. So, after living with long COVID and CFS and fibromyalgia like symptoms, and fibromyalgia, like I had those symptoms before the pandemic, but was still steady trying to get an understanding about what's happening with me and happening with my body, and was being told that mostly it was all in my head, that I didn't have anything going on. And even with the diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome, the rheumatologist pretty much alluded to it being a somatic issue that was linked to trauma and
Mm.
all of those things. And it gets really discouraging and really frustrating when you hear those types of statements, because of course our health issues are linked to the traumas that we've had to endure in our bodies for generations upon generations. And of course some of those things are passed down. Why are we not what's the innate cause? Like, how do we end the things that are continuing to perpetuate these things that are handed down to us? For one, but two, why do we have to fight so hard to get the diagnosis that we deserve to get? And it's just a continual, like, going back again. And so many of my health summaries, while I was dealing with all the long COVID issues, were misdiagnoses and getting diagnosed with eye issues. That I got diagnosed with binocular vision dysfunction, and then went to ophthalmologist, traveled across state lines to go see a doctor to get these glasses that I had to pay for out of pocket, only to find out that I didn't even have the condition that
Mm.
I was diagnosed with. And when I called the place back, and I was just like, well, why would you diagnose me with this if I didn't have it? And nobody ever got back to me. Nobody ever followed up with me. And that was in my early days of dealing with my long COVID issues, of, having balance issues and high heart rates and so many other just challenges. And so it just, it's a continual fight. It's a continual fight. And with this disability, is so varied. Every single person that has long COVID have a different understanding of what that means for them and for their body. There's not a whole lot of commonalities, unfortunately, which makes it very isolating to have to live with it. And, people will see you doing high functioning things and think that there's nothing wrong with you. People see me parent and having to keep up with this baby, but they don't see the behind the scenes where it takes me hours and hours to recover from having to do, high energy things like keeping up with the toddler that's been walking since 8 months. so, um, so it's very, very challenging.
Just listening to Black women, period. Like we just lost another woman. I forgot her name. I seen it on Facebook of childcare bearing, right? Like we just lost another Black woman, went home. started hemorrhaging. She was telling them, and they were just telling her, you know, you good. Like, and it's that you good all the time. Like for us, sometimes, like that what bothers me. Like, no, I know I'm not good. I know my body. I'm telling you that I know my body, and I just want you to listen. Like, I don't like for people to just tell me like you good. Like that's part of this. No, like I need for you to test me. Like I give you an example, and I guess this I can say this. Like I'm dealing with bladder cancer now. I was diagnosed a month ago, and with my neurofibromatosis, it puts tumors that sometimes can resemble cancer tumors, right? It
Mhm.
can resemble. And I kept telling them something's not right. That's not, I said, can you test me? They kept saying it was my neurofibromatosis when it wasn't. And I kept asking them, I had to go all the way to John Hopkins, get someone
Mm,
to test, and they found out that it was cancer tumors, not my regular tumors. And
mm,
then I'm in stage 4 when they could have been looked at before. I've been having the same problem for 3 years. So I'm looking at them like, just because my tumors are on my body don't mean it's the main problem all the time. It
mm,
could be other things. Like, can you listen? I shouldn't have to go all the way to Maryland to get someone. I said, look, something ain't right. They're not trying to test me. They're trying to write it off on this one disease. When I just know in my spirit, God has given in my spirit that it's more than my neurofibromatosis. And it come to find out once they did a biopsy, my tumors was embedded into it, but the cancer tumor and my disease had embedded into each other. But if they would have
mm,
did a biopsy some years ago, we probably could have caught this a long time ago. So now I'm in stage 4, can't really do much because someone just didn't want to listen when I'm saying, it's not that. I've been with neurofibromatosis all my life. I was born with it. My mother had it. So I kind of I know some things. But if someone would have listened, then when you go back into them and they find out it's cancer, they was like, oh, things happen. No, things don't
mm,
happen. Like, you were wrong. I need an apology, because you didn't listen. And then you didn't even want to sign off so that I could go out of state. So I just paid it out of my pocket. And I'm glad that I did. If not, I probably would have been out of here and didn't even know why.
mm. To say I'm sorry you had that experience sounds so trite, but until I find the right words, I'll just use that as a holding place. And I'm reminded so beautifully of Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks's conversations around anger, right? Or even Mariah Stewart, where she talked about righteous anger and how do we hold space for anger as we care for our delicate bodies, as we care for our bodies in order to parent. And Eris, I want to come back to parenting in a little bit, but let's pause here and if you have experienced anger, what is that like as a Black woman? And where does that anger go? How do we use that anger in service of ourselves through all of this? Or is that also dismissed, like or illnesses?
You talking about the anger? Is it dismissed?
Mhm.
Are you asking? I just want to get clarity. It's like, what do we do with the anger?
What do you do with the anger if you feel anger? Right? Because in listening to your story, I could feel the anger in my body. Right? I could literally feel it like rise up from the sole of my feet and just like red hot anger. Right. And I'm just wondering, like, because I know our listeners aren't going to see how calm you are, how, serene you present during this interview. And I'm thinking, this isn't me and I'm angry and I don't want to project my feelings onto you, but
Um,
what do you
I'm
do with it if you felt
I'm
it?
I'm gonna be honest. I'm massing. I'm massing everything. I don't know really what to do.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is space, but I'm gonna say in this space. Normally, right now I journal. I
Mhm.
just do that. But really, overall, I'm masking. But it's getting to the point where I'm just be honest. I used to be a cutter. That's how I used to kind of deal with stuff. And it's just like right there of feeling like I need to do it again. But I just journal, I talk to people, I try to challenge that in me because it's just like cutting used to just release all everything. So I don't know really what to really do. Like I know right now I'm masking because I'm mad. because I told you 3 years ago, like I knew something wasn't right. And then my brother kept saying, well, they the doctors, they know best. No, they don't always know the best. Like they just don't. Just because they got degrees and all this other, hey, I'm a doctor too, and I don't know everything. Like
Mhm.
sometimes I could be wrong. I tell my students this all the time. So I'm like masking now and I'm just trying to figure out what can I do? My family, they sue habit. They say sue. Sue ain't gonna help me. Like suing them is not gonna help. I'm just mad. So I try to sometimes when I get mad, I just go on Facebook and do these poetry and then people start emailing me and saying, you okay? I feel you must be mad right now. Cause I am, because now it's complicated, right? So now that I can't get the treatment. I can't go through chemo treatment because my kidney is failing. I only have one kidney. So it's like, what do I do? Do I sit here and die? Like, what do I sit here and do? So I'm just mad because we could have, fixed this situation earlier if you would have just listened. And
Mm.
sometimes I feel as Black women and someone with a disability, when you got those double layers, like we women, people don't want to, we think we tough. And then, we Black, they don't really want to trust us half of the time. We lying to get some pills or whatever. And then you put the disability, we just like with the whammy. Like that's what I like to say, the three whammies. And they just don't want to listen. They listen more to me now, but it shouldn't have to be to this point. When I say something now, they go and listen. Like they go and check. But I needed for you to do this 3 years ago. Now I'm just angry. I mean, I just try to mask it. And I know masking ain't the best thing to do because eventually it's gonna come out. I just hope it don't come out with nobody. You know what I'm saying? But
Mm.
not trying to be funny, but I'm masking. And that's the best answer I can get. I'm just like masking my feelings. And I know I'm gonna have to do something eventually. Like after I get off this meeting, the one thing I'm doing, I'm going to a support group
Mm.
and see if that would help. I don't know if it's going to, but I can't let this keep firing up on me before it comes out and manifests in something that's negative or not healthy for me. So because since this, I've never had blood pressure issues. Now, the blood pressure issues, like I think in 2 months, I have been to 63 doctor's appointments,
Oh, wow.
5 a day, and work on top of this, go
Mm.
teach a class, leave a class, go, come back, do all of this. It's stressful for someone could have listened. We could have not had to get to this point. So
Mhm.
all I can say, I'm masking.
Yeah. Rashida, thank you for being so vulnerable with us and so honest. Thank you for that. So
And
do
Imma say this, I'm gonna be honest too. Like I said, I'm a cutter. All my knife is in my trunk right now. Like, I'm
Mm.
not trying to take no chances. I'm not allowing myself to be in a space where I can go there because I know what my history is.
Mhm.
So I'm
Mhm.
just trying to be better than my history.
Drawing on that, be better than my history. That's powerful, right? And I think that's what both Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde were getting at when they say they're going to hold on to their anger until something better that serves them come along. And I think you're doing that. Something better has to come along for me. And you're a living example of that. Eris, do you want to add anything in that area?
I'm an artist as well. So as a writer and poet and a person who just like makes art as well, I in 2022, November 2022, I did my first gallery exhibit in St. Petersburg, Florida, called "How I Got Over,"
Mm.
which was reminiscent of the Mahalia Jackson gospel song "How I Got Over," where she says, "My soul looked back and wonder how I got
Mhm.
over." And I just kept thinking about like how did I navigate, becoming more disabled in this way? And so I put together 7 different pieces that really focused on 7 different parts of my healing, where I got to talk about those different iterations of healing, and kind of all of it was umbrellaed under this idea of being able to tell these stories and mark this part of my journey as I become more disabled, and creating art with my body, even though I didn't always have the capacity to always be able to do everything, and how I had to pivot and shift and change my vision based off of what my body could do. And so that gallery exhibit was really, really important to me. And I was able to bring it back to Cleveland this year when my baby was only about maybe, about 5 or 6 months old. I think she was about 4 or 5 months old when I did the exhibit and the performance here in Cleveland. And it was just so important for me to continue to anchor myself in my art while I was navigating disability, while I was navigating being postpartum, and just to just to show this little baby, that I'm still a person while I'm a parent, and that I'm still a person even though I am disabled, and that those things work in harmony with one another. They don't always work. Sometimes it feels like there's tension. Of course, there's tension, but they still work in harmony. And so, I've really taken my anger and put it into my art, and been able to, I had a therapist a couple years ago say to me, how can you welcome these emotions as visitors, and let them stay for a while, and then, ask them to leave when it's time for them to leave. And so I've done a good deal of like welcoming sorrow, welcoming anger, welcoming shame, and allowing it to come into the door of my spirit to say that, because if I ignore it, they'll stay knocking and the knocking will get louder. But if I welcome it in and say, okay, you're here, but you won't, all right, but you can't sit down. Uh, you know, you can't have no cup of tea, but like, but sometimes you
Can't
have
get
to
no
share.
water.
You can't get no water. Ain't no water. Maybe you can get some tap water. And we on a boil alert in Cleveland right now because we had a water main break. You can have some of that water, but you can't have none of my good water. But being able to welcome the hard things, and being able to dismiss them when it's time, because if I ignore it, it'll fester. And I'm thinking about Rashida, you saying, I wear a mask, and I think that's such a excellent metaphor for a person who's living with long COVID, who spends the majority of their time masking and having to mask, my neurospicy parts of myself, while also having to physically mask when I'm out and about, and being like, being the odd person out. Whereas, most places I go to, 90 to 95, 99% of the people do not mask. And it's the one thing that could protect me and protect my child in the long run. And it's hard because I still want to be a person in the world. I do not want to be completely shut in, sequestered off away from the rest of the world, because, my mental health requires that I have social interactions with folks. But oftentimes that means that I'm the odd person out wearing a mask, and I have to do it courageously, even when it feels uncomfortable.
It's just been hard in the classroom because these students be doing a lot of stuff, coming in with codes and all this other stuff, and we got a still high level of COVID at our institution that they don't tell the students, but they tell us. And I'm like, they sitting there breathing and blowing and up in my class, but they even told me that they prefer me not to wear one, and I had to just get a doctor to say she has to wear one. But I have a friend now that put little sayings on my mask to, make them a little fancy, but I definitely felt you on that. It's just, I don't want to be known for my disability. Like, for example, like kind of do, but kind of don't. But
Mm,
I just don't want to be treated as less, you
mm,
know. And I wanted to also say I like the fact about your art exhibit. I had a book listening party. I took all the chapters in my book. I put a picture on it. Like one of my chapters called Bobby Brown, Tenderoni Girl. That's the good girl that's the bad girl when I was back doing some things. Let me say that. And I used my voice. So I embedded a QR code, and people went to each section and heard my voice speak each chapter, the part that I thought needed to come out the book. So it was like a little art exhibit, like how you saw like all the different pictures and people can go and look. People could scan and listen to my story. And it felt good because some people said they read the book, but to hear it in my voice, they already heard it when they was reading, but to actually hear it, made me stand out. So I want to say I know that art exhibit did you some justice because mine did me some justice, just being able to put out me on another space, like another campus and show a different part of me. So I know that was rewarding for you.
Thank you both for that. So we are kind of approaching our last minute. And Eris, I want to talk a little bit about parenting because our listeners, I'm not editing out your baby because your baby was part of this conversation. So you're going to have your debut, and maybe give us a little bit of what it feels like to parent through the lens of long COVID.
Yeah, it is. It is a challenge. It is a gift. I believe that I was told long before the pandemic that it would be difficult for me to conceive a child and carry a child to full term. And then, with having long COVID and seeing all the studies, the outcomes were even more grim. Can you please stop eating the book? Um, come here. The outcomes were even more grim. I had, many trips to the ER there was at one point where we couldn't hear the baby's heartbeat. And I tried to go to one hospital system and they wanted to charge me. I didn't have insurance at the time. They wanted to charge me, or they didn't take my insurance. They wanted to charge me $700 for an
Mm,
ultrasound to see if my baby had a heartbeat.
mm,
Um, and having to drive to another hospital system to be able to get the care that I need, only to see this baby bouncing around in my belly, doing, literal backflips. This baby has not stopped moving ever since. And so, I believe that this baby coming into my world in this particular season has been just a gift because it anchors me in my survival. It
mm,
does not anchor me in the desire to find a cure or anything of that nature. That's not what I'm seeking, but I am seeking, seeking longevity and sustainability, and holding these medical professionals accountable to be the people who they say that they are. If you're at the top of your field, I need you to act like it, and take
mhm,
care of me because I'm working really hard to take care of this other little human. And it's made me very protective about their care. It's made me protective about my care. I go through a lot of hoops and buying a lot of different items and things to make sure that we are safe as we travel. My baby is 1 years old and has already been to 8 states.
mm,
When I was pregnant, I went to the Beyonce concert twice, once international and once in Washington, DC. And so I have not stopped living,
mm.
and I don't ever plan to stop living, living life, while I'm alive. I plan to continue to do that and continue to offer my child joy and wonderment and merriment. And that's so important to me, despite whatever is going on with my body. And so I rely heavily on my village to collaborate with me to be able to do that. And, I rest when my body says rest, and I move when I have the capacity to move. And when my spoons, my forks, and my knives are all out, I let my spoons, my forks, and my knives be all out. And so, it's a gift.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That explains why that child can't keep still because you didn't took him to Beyonce.
Yeah. And Janelle Monae. Janelle Monae rubbed my belly on stage while I was seven
Okay.
and a
That's
half
so
months pregnant. And so, yes, just a
And
very, very busy baby.
and it's a beautiful thing to bear witness to in this moment. I cannot
Thank
lie.
you.
So we're getting ready to wrap up. Really quickly, both of you, what is one thing that you want the world to know about being simultaneously Black, woman, femme, living with a disability? What is one thing that you want the world to know?
For me, I just think when it comes to policies, it's more one thing I want to stand up that we need to be sitting at tables.
Mm.
Like,
Say
and
that again. Say that
we
again.
need to be sitting at tables, head of tables. That's my big takeaway. Like, we need to be sitting at tables, and whenever we have the space, use the space. Like through our research, like, I tell you, Eris, Julian helped me discover myself in my writing. And I'm gonna shout it up to the rooftop. Like I didn't know where I belong, but she allowed me to find where I belong. I used to think this disability was a weakness, but I found out it's my greatness.
Mhm.
And it's just about how I use it. So I just think we need to be at these tables, and if you have an opportunity to write about it and research, do it however you can get your story out. I think that's my big thing. Get it out. Even if it's on Facebook, whether it's on TikTok, whatever, get your story out because it's important. I'm glad that you put me, online with this young lady, like with the baby. Like it just gave me energy. Like me as a woman, with my disability, I done miscarried 13 times. So it's no, and a stillborn. So it's just like it's not gonna happen. But when you have a space, that's my biggest thing. Like use the space that you in. I'm gonna say this. I don't think everybody's gifted to be vulnerable. Some people are, some people aren't.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that's how God built. I tell you the panties I wear, like I don't care. Like
Mhm.
I'm an open book. So I just say just being open.
Thank you for that. Be open and use your space. Eris, you want to maybe give us your one thing?
Yeah, I would just say, joy is your birthright.
Mm.
And no matter what your circumstances are, we are we are so allowed to have joy. Like, having joy does not mean that you don't encounter your sorrow. You plan
Mm.
your joy because sorrow is inevitable. You can't plan the hurt that comes and all of that, but you can inject ease, you can inject joy, you can inject wonder into your world, and that is your birthright. That is how we heal generational trauma, how we reclaim our time, how we reclaim our righteous minds. And so
Mhm.
do the hard work of injecting joy and finding ways that truly make you smile and truly make you just feel like the sun is always shining on you. I'm so grateful the sun came through right at that
Yeah.
moment. I was like, I needed that. And so just allow it to be your birthright. You are worthy. You're worthy of the joy that is in this world amidst all the sorrow and the hurt that is happening.
Thank you. Thank you both for being truth tellers. Thank you both for just laying it out on the table for us about what life can be like. The possibilities in the midst of the sorrow. And on that, I say thank you, thank you, thank you for being on this podcast of COVID Unmasked. Thank you for engaging in this conversation. I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on all you have heard and to think of your story. For more stories, resources to contribute, and for updates on the larger Black Women Talk COVID project, I invite you to visit the website blackwomentalkcovid.com. That's blackwomentalkcovid.com. Remember to take care of your spirit. Until we meet again.